LUCAS AOUN is Australia's leading biohacker. That means for us men that are wanting to be able to get the upper edge and upper limit on making sure we get the most out of ourselves, whether it comes to sleep, productivity, sex, performance, you name it. Lucas is the man that has been over on 220 podcasts, has recorded over 600 videos on how to optimize every single bit of hormonal health. This episode, we go into whether you're trying to grow muscle, whether you're trying to get better sleep, whether you're trying not to prematurely ejaculate, or whether you're just trying to get a better orgasm. All these things, these taboo topics that never get spoken about, Lucas is not afraid to go and give you the in-depth detail of every single herb or supplement you need to help get the best version of yourself in any of these topics or categories. Now, if you haven't already, please make sure you subscribe or follow Squeezing the Plums. This ensures that we get more guests on, like Lucas, that can give you the most amount of value possible. Anyways, let's get to the show. It's one of those ones where, like, you know, you've done what, like 220 podcasts?
Yeah.
Right? You've done a couple. And so you're used to getting out there and talking.
Yeah,
But for a lot of people, sitting in that chair and listening to someone, it's daunting.
Yeah.
They're afraid. They're like, fuck, what, you know, whatever.
At the beginning it was. At the very start. Yeah, it got pretty daunting. I'd say the biggest one that I was on was like Mark Bell's podcast, and I was so fired up, man.
Yeah.
It was 6 a.m. in the morning. Mum and Dad were both upstairs. James was above me. It was in the garage.
Yeah.
And I had just set up my camera. And I'm like, I have to smash this. There's no, like, it has to be exceptional. And I came in full guns blazing. I was so fired up, and I think they could tell because I was so young. It was my very first proper podcast, and I just like just spat it all out, and it was the best.
Yeah, yeah. Did you
fun.
find talking in that podcast in your first time getting on a podcast that you spoke a million miles an hour? And how did you reflect on that when you listened to it?
Yeah, when I looked back, I felt like it for that subject matter, it demonstrated like a lot of authority. And they were just like, wow, this guy knows his shit. Because I was a bit of a nobody back then. Like, they didn't really know me. So I was a bit of like an underdog. So I had to prove myself, man. I had to really like show them, fuck, this guy's clued on.
Now, the question that I asked you prior to coming in is, if the world suffered a massive calamity and the majority of men were wiped out, but you were left with younger, hungry men that want to be able to get the most out of themselves, what would be the topic of conversation that you would speak to them about? That topic that you spoke about would be how to optimize hormonal health naturally, right? That's your baby, and that's, you know, what you feel most confident talking about. To be able to talk about that stuff, it has to come from somewhere. So why is it that anyone listening to this episode today should look to you?
The main reason is because I want them to feel like they have autonomy and like to feel empowered within their body. So the biggest thing that I want to prevent is seeing men struggle every single day and think that they wake up and feel the exact same every single day. And that's because like that's just the way it is. I want them to just believe deep down that they can truly change the way that they like think, feel, and perform every single day. And that can come down to optimizing their biology. Like, biology is at the core of everything that we do. And if you don't have the right like hormonal profile, there's no possible way you can be the ultimate man that most men are striving to be.
Why you? What about you makes you the authority in this space?
Because I have not only talked the talk, but I've walked the walk. So I've actually, optimized my own testosterone levels as high as possible naturally. And I've been able to implement all of the things that I educate about. I've either tried them, tested them myself on my own body, and I've also coached over 100 different clients in that area to really dial in their hormones. So I believe I do have the authority because I've got the naturopathy background, 4 years of, intense study. I worked in my dad's pharmacy for 3 years. I was researching from the age of 16 on this sort of stuff. So it's pretty much just been my absolute obsession.
Yeah, absolutely. And, now when you look at you, you got over 50,000 subscribers on YouTube. You've produced over 600 videos. You've done 220 bloody podcasts. So, you're even selling yourself short there. You've been on TED. Is that right? TED Talk or TEDx?
Aspiring to get there.
You're aspiring to get there. So that one's on the way. And you've done so much work in this space. But for people listening, I know how much depth of knowledge you've got. So I'm going to start at the most basic fundamental principle, which is, what are hormones and why are they important for us?
Yeah. So when we look at hormones, these are basically chemical signals that occur within the body, and they regulate many aspects of our biology. So, for example, the hormone that signals hunger is ghrelin. Like, that is one of the hormones that actually makes people want to just eat. Like when you open up the fridge door and you're like, oh, I'm starving. Like, that feeling is mostly mediated by that particular hormone. But if we look at like the diversity of hormones, we are producing hormones right now as we speak. Like, you are synthesizing and producing very small amounts of different types of hormones. You're producing thyroid hormone, you're producing gastric hormones like stomach hormones, you're producing testicular hormones, which is the topic that I love, which is how can men really dial in and optimize the hormone that governs resilience, confidence, and drive. These are the three areas that I think are possibly the most in demand by a number of men these days, because most men that I work with come to me saying that they feel like low motivation, lack of confidence, and lack of drive. And these three areas can be easily governed and regulated by the master androgenic hormone, testosterone. So that is why I like to describe that hormone as like, it's not just for athletic performance. Most men know that testosterone is like the hormone that builds muscle, burns fat, makes you look aesthetic. It also has some pretty powerful psychoactive properties in the brain.
Nice. And so, alongside testosterone, we know we've got a lot of people would have heard of like melatonin, cortisol, dopamine, growth hormone, thyroid hormone, as you said, estrogen for women, also in men, but more prevalent in women, right? So we've got all these hormones that are produced in different parts of the body. And, it seems like now that you're really dialing in on that testosterone hormone. How much do these other hormones that get produced really affect someone's testosterone?
That's a really, really intelligent question. So what happens within the human body? I like to look at hormones as a symphony, as an orchestra. So there are many different hormones that are being produced in different quantities in different individuals. Like you said before, there's thyroid hormone, there's estrogen, there's cortisol. These other hormones do impact the production of testosterone. They do have either a stimulatory effect or an inhibitory effect on testosterone. And when it comes to like really dialing in and optimizing testosterone, we need to also bear in mind that when we're getting a blood test, for example, that we need to also be assessing where are all the other hormones at? Like, where is cortisol? Because if cortisol's very high, then that actually has a suppressive effect on testosterone production. And for those listening in, cortisol, you would understand this, is the body's main stress hormone. It puts the body into sympathetic dominance. And when you're jacking out a lot of cortisol, you're under very stressful environments, that can dampen testosterone signaling.
Is there something to be said around people that overtrain then?
Absolutely. So there's such a thing as overtraining, or what they call overreaching, which is where an individual is outdoing their caloric intake significantly. Like, for example, let's say you're training twice a day, doing like maybe a HIIT session in the morning and then a weight session in the evening, but then you're not optimizing your sleep. So you're also in a sleep deficit. And if you're also in a caloric deficit or you're under eating, this is a recipe for an imbalance between you'll end up experiencing high cortisol and low testosterone.
I'm going to be greedy now, and I'm going to ask you for some advice, right? And I'm also going to bring out a few case studies.
Yeah.
So recently I got a hair transplant that was done, right? That's about 10 days ago from today, okay? And I was instructed that I'm not allowed to exercise. I'm not allowed to get sunlight. I'm not allowed to sweat. I can't have sex for a period of time. These are all things that I love doing, right? And all of a sudden I can't do any of them. And it almost resembles someone that's injured themselves, right? They've gone through an injury. They can't really train or maybe train around the injury. Maybe they're in hospital. Maybe they've injured themselves so bad that, they can't get exposure to other forms of activity. So for the next 30 days, I'm doing Sweat FA. What is it from a nootropic stack or from a hormonal health perspective that I need to do that can hack my way into making sure I don't lose muscle? I keep myself fired up. I can do things like a podcast and not feel low on energy. Have you got a little synthesis that I can take away?
Yeah. So the master regulatory pathway that basically governs and determines muscle growth is a pathway called mTOR, which stands for mammalian target of rapamycin. Now, this pathway is activated when you consume protein. So if you go on a high protein diet, that's obviously going to help with triggering mTOR, which then triggers something known as protein synthesis. So if you're looking at like, how can we amplify or sort of jack up that pathway? We can do this with some pretty simple supplements. Number one, we can do this with creatine monohydrate. That can do a pretty good job at, stimulating that mTOR pathway. There's a new peptide that's only just been released this year, which I truly do believe is going to be the biggest oral peptide of 2024.
Tell me.
It's called dileucine peptide. So this is going to be, and that's one thing that I'm pretty well known for, is I've got a pretty good eye for seeing things that'll pop, things that'll like kick off. I was right about one of the ingredients. I was actually correct about a pre-workout ingredient. It was called teacrine. That ended up being the most popular ingredient in 2021. But this new one here, dileucine, stimulates protein synthesis 42% more potently than leucine by itself. And leucine, what did you eat for breakfast
I'm
today?
fasting
So you're still fasting?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so what do you reckon you might break your fast with?
Well, normally I would break my fast with I'm actually trying at the moment, I'm trying a keto diet for the first time. So I'm not going to get into that too much, but I'm going 4 eggs, feta,
Nice.
a bit of bacon, and
Was the keto just like after the
Yeah. So I didn't do it for the first week because
Yeah.
I didn't want to create a super amount of shock in the body. But now I'm looking at doing it because there's a bit of puppy fat that I want to remove. I am thinning down so much though, but the puppy fat's still remaining.
Okay.
And so it's really interesting. So I'm like trying to dial up my protein, but I'm going to start taking some blood tests to see if my ketone levels are high enough.
Yeah. This is all without training as well, right?
Not training, yeah.
Far out. That must be tough.
So I'm just trying to figure out, I'm like, well, my goal is, whilst I'm not doing anything, I can't do anything. It's like, what can I do to create change in my body? And so I went through a big bulking phase last year.
Yeah, you got super jacked.
I got jacked, right? I was like, and I got to about 102 kilos.
Far out.
Now I'm sitting at about 92, 93.
You dropped that much?
Yeah.
Wow.
But that's over time, right? Because I trimmed down a bit, and now I'm trying to just get rid of that last bit of belly fat, which seems to be the fucking most resistance thing. But I think because of my history of headaches and stress, cortisol and all these hormones, right?
For sure.
You hold that little bit. So I'm like, well, if I can use fat as fuel, maybe I can get rid of that last little bit and build myself back up.
The cortisol, I mean, that makes sense. I've had a few like direct clients that I've worked with who have been like, help me drop this like last layer of body fat. And I have attacked it pretty potently with some of the most potent cortisol lowering substances on the planet. One of them is a pharmaceutical compound, which I won't discuss here, but the other one is actually over the counter. It's called Emodin, EMODIN, and that will lower cortisol by up to 64%. And people literally notice like less water retention, drier look, denser look. So that's definitely one to look into.
Is it sustainable?
Nah, so obviously, so this is where it comes into like, this is a cycle. So you wouldn't want to, if you always suppress cortisol and lower it and keep it flatlined, like you're trying to blunt the cortisol spike in the morning, you will struggle to get up in the morning. You'll feel groggy, you'll have less energy, you'll be craving coffee, you'll be craving sugar. If your cortisol levels are tanked, trust me, I've been there. I've been, yeah.
And so if we're going back now to the ideal stack, right? And I'm going to go through a few scenarios so that, there are people that might want to get bigger in the gym or substitute coffee or sleep better. So I'm going to go through all of these case studies with you. So whoever's listening will gather something. Male, female, doesn't matter, right?
Awesome.
But I'll greedily finish this off with myself in that sense of I'm sedentary. I can't do much. I want to keep my muscle. I want to burn that. Well, not keep. It's hard to keep muscle and burn fat, but I want to remove that last bit of body fat, and I'm working on that now. What is the stack that you would say I could start with that would help me on that mission?
You could definitely consider, seeing as though you're on a ketogenic diet, you could complement that by stacking it with another amino acid, L-carnitine. So either acetyl L-carnitine or L-carnitine, but you can use dosages of up to like 2 grams per day. Now, that's main function is to shuttle these fatty acids into the mitochondria to create ATP. So you're actually probably going to have like more energy, more daytime mental clarity, energy and stuff like that. You might notice your training is a little bit better. You might have, I just realized you're not training.
Not training.
I just think
I'll be all of a sudden G'd up to want to train. Yeah.
You'll be fired up to train. You could also, depending upon appetite, because appetite is a big, obviously protein is the most satiating macronutrient, fats being second. We could suppress appetite through like yerba mate tea, which is a Argentinian South American tea that has some GLP-1 agonist properties, which is similar to, I'm not saying directly the same as semaglutide or Ozempic, but it has some appetite suppressing qualities, which could be worthwhile exploring. And then you could stack that with what I said before, which was the amodin, and then the dileucine peptide, and possibly even some creatine.
That sounds great. I think maybe we'll talk about Ozempic probably at some point because that's such a controversial drug, right? But obviously affecting your hormones is a big part of, what you said earlier. We secrete ghrelin and lectin as your hunger and your satiated hormone, right? And so that's very, very interesting. And we'll talk about that. But in terms of the other things, that stack seems very interesting. Would it change if you weren't on a ketogenic diet?
I would,
because most of the people listening won't be on a ketogenic diet.
Yeah, it might change. So the other thing that I would possibly consider bringing in would be, have you heard of berberine by any chance?
I have heard of berberine.
So
I'm taking berberine. So, but anyways, explain to me what berberine is.
So berberine has some pretty robust clinical trials to suggest that it can keep blood sugar levels relatively low. However, there is actually a new form of berberine that was released 2 years ago. And this one has 3 to 5 times better absorption by the body. So we'll just break it down for your audience. Berberine is an alkaloid that is found within a couple of different herbs, and its primary use is to lower blood sugar. It also helps to increase body insulin sensitivity, and it also helps to lower cholesterol and has some other amazing properties at modulating the gut. So naturopaths and nutritionists, a lot of these doctors and functional medicine practitioners, they'll prescribe berberine if somebody has SIBO, like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, gut issues, IBS, things of that nature. Recently, we've learned that berberine, when you take it in a capsule form, 500 milligram, let's say you take a 500 milligram capsule, a very, very small amount of that berberine actually gets absorbed by the body. And this is one of the drawbacks between, you got Western medicine, big pharma, versus natural medicine, which is like what I studied, naturopathy. With drugs, most pharmaceutical drugs get absorbed pretty damn well. Like they get absorbed. We understand a lot about their pharmacokinetics, how they work in the body. Berberine, we know, doesn't have the best bioavailability, which means what you take in a capsule form doesn't necessarily get broken down and used by the body. This new form of berberine is called dihydroberberine, or DHB, has significantly better bioavailability, and it's actually the metabolite of berberine. And which this also means you can drop the dosage down to around 100 milligrams, and that'll be like the equivalent of taking 1,000 milligrams, and you get that blood sugar lowering effect, insulin sensitizing effect, and also it helps with burning fat as well.
Love that. So then let's flip the coin. So let's say you're a male gym goer who wants to make gains, right, and wants to keep off the gear. What do I look at as my stack to be able to go, right, I want to bulk up, get strong, build muscle, and I'm doing all the right things. I've got my macros in place, and I'm doing that well, but I want to supercharge that. How does one supercharge that?
Yeah, so we can approach this from a few different routes. The first way that what I typically prescribe is there's a product called Recuv bipeptides, and basically it's a really highly bioavailable mixture of amino acids, these are basically the building blocks for protein. They're not going to be anywhere near as potent as Gear or SARMs, for example. And that's the other thing I'd like to mention here is that in the muscle building space, literally, if a guy searches online like alternatives to steroids or alternatives to TRT, something called SARMs will pop up, right? SARMs stand for selective androgen receptor modulators. They're marketed as alternatives to steroids. Why? Well, man, they will definitely get you jacked. Like this shit, they actually really do work. I've seen guys take them for like 8 to 12 weeks. We're looking at things like RAD 140, LGD 4033. There's other ones as well. These compounds they're very potent, but if you use them for too long and you don't know how to use them properly, you'll end up with some liver damage. You'll end up suppressing testosterone production, like very potently. They have some pretty nasty side effects. So the next best thing that I usually recommend is like Recuv bipeptides, which is like you take 3 tablets pre and post workout. And for most guys, they notice that they feel just like they get a better pump in the gym, but like which guy doesn't want that? They feel like they don't get as sore as well post-workout. I mean, the reduction in muscle soreness means you can go harder the next workout even earlier. So definitely consider adding in that. You could also add in some other amino acids. So citrulline malate is there as well for the blood flow, minimizing lactic acid buildup, assisting with that muscle growth pathway. And then definitely the dileucine peptide, that would be like a nice like trio. And then you can also add in something known as ecdysteroids. Now, ecdysteroids, spelled ECDY.
Right.
They were used by Russian athletes back in the 1980s, right? So
fucking get me on it, mate. It already sounds yeah.
These ecdysteroids were actually banned by WADA at one stage because then these are oral, by the way. This is not injection. This is literally ecdysteroids, meaning plant steroids. ECDY, ecdysteroids. So if you look up ecdysterone, there's products out there. Make sure it's legitimate. Where it has like the ability to stimulate muscle growth, like somewhat comparable to low dose. There's some research suggesting that it can be comparable to a very low dose cycle of steroids.
Right. Yeah. And so how safe is this? So I'm not talking SARMs, I'm not talking steroids, I'm talking about what you've provided us here, because this is absolute gold for anyone that's listening.
Yeah.
And I hope people realize how fucking awesome it is that you're sharing some of your wisdom right now. 1, how safe is it? 2, how expensive is it?
Safety profile for ecdysteroids have been pretty well documented. In terms of side effects, it will not suppress testosterone production, so it will not affect your natural production of your hormones. It will not cause anything like gyno or man boobs or water retention, none of those estrogenic effects. It should not affect mood or mood is a big one because that's a pathway a lot of guys don't like touching, like not affecting, I guess. Like they don't want, not many guys want to take substances that's going to make them more aggressive or irritable or anxious. Like I've taken things over the years that have made me a lot more irritable, a lot more aggressive, a lot more anxious, and I'm just like, nah, see you later. It's not worth it. So the other compounds that I mentioned as well, the dileucine peptide safety profile is remarkable. Like it is literally, there's human clinical studies on this compound. They compare it to leucine. For that to make it to market by the biggest supply, like literally created by Iovate, who supply MuscleTech. MuscleTech.com is literally one of the biggest. It's probably top 10 most popular supplement companies in the US. So there's no way they would risk releasing like a dodgy or unsafe compound.
Yeah, wow.
Price point. So the price point, you're looking at around $80 to $100 per month ish. You know, it's reasonable for most.
For most guys.
Yeah.
You know, and I think if you think of it like that, like $20 a week or $25 a week to invest into something like that. Like a lot of people buy shit protein bars and protein shakes for $6 from 7-Eleven.
Yeah, which is full of sugar.
Which is full of sugar and full of shit. So if you actually stack it up properly, you might actually, you know, boost your capacity to be able to, you know, grow muscle and keep a good level of leanness in that process. Would you add creatine? You spoke about creatine. Would you add creatine to that stack as well?
Yeah, I did talk about creatine monohydrate. I would say that about 6 months ago, I actually popularized a brand new version of creatine, which is called cregutine. This form actually has, again, I think one thing you're probably noticing about the information that I share, and this is going to lead into like eventually one of my ultimate legacy goals is that in the future, Singy, like my goal is I want to release products that no one has heard about before. Like I want to literally bring out ingredients that no one's even heard about before, or they're just unique or they're novel. Like that is what I want to be known for. So when I talk about these things, I want to be like, fuck, this guy knows it. This guy's bringing new shit to the table. He's not talking about just the mainstream, boring, basic stuff. Like I want to be unique in that sense. This new version of creatine is called cregutine. This one is like seriously badass. Like if you check out my YouTube video, we can even link it in the show notes.
Yeah.
This one is insane in terms of it's the way that the body is able to, you know, absorb it and utilize it.
Yeah, wow. That'll be super interesting. And I'll put that YouTube video in the shorts. Sorry, the YouTube video in the show notes so that, you know, people that are listening can find your content and find you on YouTube, because that's where you do some serious damage. Oh, yeah. You're about to say something, but that's okay. The other two things that people tend to struggle with is a substitute for coffee.
Yep.
And the ability to sleep, right? You can choose whatever one you want to start off with. Like I personally, I don't have coffee anymore. I just have decaf.
Yep.
Right? So I want the benefit of the antioxidants, but I don't want to have to rely on anything. So for those people that need a substitute, or let's say, you know, I haven't been able to sleep very well because, you know, having the hair transplant, I can't really properly lie on the back of my head. So you're a little bit tired throughout the day, plus not training. So what is that substitute that I could look for with coffee?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm pretty similar to yourself. I mean, I don't drink coffee, but when I do, I save it for when I really, really need it. So like if I'm trying to break a PB for a 5-kilometer run, if I have coffee, man, I'm just like I'm on speed basically. I've deliberately made myself also very super sensitive to caffeine because I've played around with some dopamine pathways. Like this is really, really high level, like nootropic biohacking shit, where I've like upregulated my dopamine receptors so that I'm hyper responsive. It's called super sensitivity to stimulants. So you can do this there's a few compounds that I've used over the years that have had a positive effect on stimulant tolerance. I've wanted to make myself hypersensitive to stimulants, so that when I use them, like I'm just fired up and just ready to crush it. But if I had to look at compounds like that I could use that give me that stimulatory effect without caffeine, there's some seriously powerful compounds. The first one I would say would be something called teacrine, which is also known as theacrine. Now that one there is unique because it does not spike your blood pressure, which is what we see with caffeine. It does not increase heart rate. So that's another benefit. So you're literally looking at the stimulating effects of caffeine without the effects on heart rate or blood pressure. And then the other unique benefit of this teacrine is that it has a ridiculously long half-life, which means that you can take it in the morning and by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you still don't feel like you need any stimulation because you're still feeling energetic and aroused and alert and stuff like that. So teacrine between 100 to 200 milligrams in capsule form. It's not a tea. It's actually it's a supplement that can do a pretty good job at delaying fatigue and increasing energy.
With caffeine, it's interesting. So I think I was listening to, is it Matthew Walker talk about sleep? And he was talking about the half-life of coffee being the quarter life of coffee being approximately 12 hours in the system, right? One of the things that they was talking about was is it a stimulant or is it something that just blocks your sleepy receptor? So is it actually a stimulant?
It is. So it is through, it does block the, so there's like the adenosine builds up in the brain as you go throughout your day. Its levels are lowest in the morning and it's highest at night, which is why you get tired. Caffeine will block one of the adenosine, so it's blocking the signal to be tired. So it will reduce your perception of fatigue, but you're actually fatigued, but it's just blocking that. So you're actually fatigued, but you're just blocking that. But it is also a dopamine releaser. So it will help to increase dopamine release in the striatum, nucleus accumbens, and a few other pathways. It'll also block the GABA receptor. And the GABA receptor is the same receptor that alcohol binds to. So alcohol, it makes people feel relaxed and socially fluent and have fun at parties, be the life of the party, so to speak, because ethanol or alcohol binds to that GABA pathway, and that makes you feel less anxious, less stressed, and more fluent, confident, funny, outgoing, all the stuff we want when we go out. You don't have to use alcohol though. Like this is why I literally take 3 grams of taurine. Like I literally had 3 grams of taurine before this podcast because I'm having a chat, singy. I don't want to be too like intense or whatever. I want to be like able to enjoy it and have fun and have a chat and not be too intense. But yeah, I'd say teacrine is unique in that regard. It's unique in that regard, and it can do a pretty good job at swapping out someone's desire for coffee.
Does that mean like an espresso martini is that the ultimate fucking drink?
Yeah. Well, if you look at Red Bull, so Red Bull has taurine in the can. It obviously has caffeine, so it's caffeine plus caffeine plus taurine. And I think a lot of people that love Red Bull are probably actually just loving the effects of taurine. It's an amazing amino acid.
Wow, that's super cool. That's super cool because you see it, right? You see it on the packaging with taurine. You're like, what the fuck's taurine?
Yeah, exactly.
The final one is sleep. Now, I talked about Matthew Walker and I talked about his work that he does on sleep. And we have heard all the literature around how important sleep is. There are so many people, right, that are struggling to get to sleep, one, quickly, and two, being able to hold their sleep throughout the night. With what you do, I'm sure you see a lot of people suffering with bad sleep. We see all the people now mouth taping and fucking doing all this shit. And by the way, I've done it and it's good.
I love it.
I love it, right? But I'm saying there's heaps of people doing this stuff. From a biological standpoint, what can we take or have prior to sleep that will allow us to sleep better?
Awesome. So from a dietary perspective, from a nutrition, food, everyone eats food before bed. I'm sure like at least 3 hours before bed. I'm sure everyone's doing that. Okay. So what can we do maybe like an hour before bed? There's some pretty impressive research looking at how kiwi fruit, specifically 2 kiwi fruit about 90 minutes before bed, helps with sleep onset and sleep maintenance. So literally will help you fall asleep faster and improve the quality of your overall sleep. There's literally kiwi fruit, which you can get from your local
I'm
supermarket.
officially getting off keto. Yeah.
So that's definitely number one. You could also consider, if you don't want to have the fruit or the fructose, or you're worried about the sugar, pistachios. So pistachios have some pretty good research to suggest that they can raise levels of melatonin in humans. So pistachios, about a handful or so. I prefer to do this closer to bedtime, usually about 30 to 45 minutes before bed. Can help with that, sleep quality. I track my sleep. I've done all the experiments myself because I'm just that crazy biohacker who loves subjecting himself to
To all the shit.
Yeah. Well, you got to walk the walk before you have to do that.
Yeah. You have to walk the walk in your journey.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you have no idea of what your potential clients are doing or going through, right?
Yeah, and it's also I've listened to the feedback I've had from all the guys that I coach, and I'm like, yep, I've heard this before. Yep, I know that. Yep. Just like with your podiatrist, like you would see the same people say the same thing, like, oh yeah, if I turn my foot this way, you'd be like, yeah, I already knew that was going to happen.
It's like I'm treating your partner right now, right?
Yeah.
She came in and she wasn't able to do the exercise correctly, showed her how to do it, and then she got better.
Yeah, it's perfect example. Like with it, when it comes to like different foods, like you got the kiwi fruit, the pistachios, from a novel like biohacking perspective, mouth taping is definitely a game changer for me, at least. It's been great. It will force the body to breathe through the nose, which is where nitric oxide is produced and helps with that parasympathetic nervous system. Big fan of that. Also, inclining your bed. So this is unique because it's like, why is it that we get better quality sleep when we're sleeping on an incline? Like, what is it about that? How does that even work? First of all, it assists with the ability for the brain to detoxify. So it enhances something known as glymphatic drainage, which is where the glymph glands, the glymph nodes, they actually have an ability to detoxify more rapidly. And it helps with like people, if anyone gets like reflux or heartburn during the nighttime, sleeping slightly inclined can help with that. And then also for back pain as well. There's a number of people who've reported like significantly less back pain by inclining their bed. So there's a few things there. I'd definitely say wearing those blue light blocking glasses, those blue blockers before bed. Man, I would have to say I was probably like one of the first. I think I started wearing them like 7 years ago. And I was like, man, this stuff's going to kick off. Like eventually a lot of people will be wearing them. It's basically, have you ever used them before?
I use them.
Oh, you use them every night?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're also...
Yeah, I'm all over it. I'm all over it.
Yeah.
But I think, because half the time, if you're running your own business or you're doing something like before today's, podcast day, I was refining all my notes at night, looking at my laptop, looking at the emails that I sent my guests prior to coming on. But I don't want to do that, then affect my sleep too much because then, what good am I going to be today interviewing you? So I think that's all super important. Melatonin for sleep.
Yep.
There are a lot of people that take it that don't get results. Obviously, people that take it for the first time, most of the time they feel like they get some benefit, right?
Yeah.
Can you become, I guess, too used to melatonin? And also, is there anything stronger from a pharmaceutical perspective that people can look at? Because there are things that over the counter you can get Restovit or you can do all this type of crap, but you're groggy as hell the next day.
Yeah.
So are there options for that? And also, can you develop almost like a numbness to melatonin if you take it?
Yeah. So interestingly, like we started the podcast, we spoke about hormones. Melatonin is one of those hormones where if you take it, it actually does not stop your body's ability to produce it naturally. So basically, let's say I'll use an example of what I actually did. I took melatonin, 1 milligram for a week straight, and then I stopped taking it deliberately to see if that would affect my sleep on the night that I didn't take it. It had no effect. I didn't have any like withdrawal or habituation effect. I felt when I was using melatonin, I personally didn't wake up feeling super refreshed. I felt like I had way more vivid dreams and like just intense dreams. And I was like, what the hell? Like, I'm 27 years of age and I'm already on melatonin. Like, do I really want to be taking this for the rest of my life? There's arguments for and against melatonin because it's actually a super, super, super potent antioxidant. Like, it is so good for your immune system, really, really powerful for your immune system. Perhaps even stronger than the body's master antioxidant glutathione. So melatonin, if somebody is recovering from flu, a virus, not mentioning the type, an infection or anything, or any sort of sickness, melatonin can help with that immune response. It can definitely help with that. If I had to say to someone, okay, like, you don't want to use melatonin, you don't want to use over-the-counter stuff, you don't want to get any prescription benzodiazepines or whatever, then if you take a pretty big dosage of glycine, about 5 grams, which would literally cost you 10 cents, like literally 10 cents per night, 5 grams of glycine will help to cool down your core body temperature, and it will help with deep sleep as well. So glycine is an amino acid. It's found in bone broth, collagen. If you take 5 grams, you're going to lower cortisol. You're going to promote longevity pathways. It's super potent anti-inflammatory, and it has all these other benefits for sleep. So definitely, that's an experiment you could try for like less than 10 cents per night.
Can I give one more? Can I please give one more scenario?
Yeah.
Because you mentioned glutathione, right?
Yeah.
And typically people that are into the biohacking space, they'll use a spray under their tongue or something when they're on the piss, right? To help with recovery. Yeah. Right. For those that don't know, that's a little hack there, right? But I'm speaking to the person that is a biohacker. So for people that are going on a night out, right? Which seem to be the majority of my audience, or for people that are wanting to prevent a hangover, but they've got a social time of year. What is the stack, and this is the final one I'll ask you, that they can look at to help with hangovers and help with processing alcohol fast through their body?
Yeah. So I've been asked this a number of times.
Sorry to re-ask it to you then.
I like getting asked it because, like, all right, you're doing something harmful, but at the same time you're like, but what can I put into place that can at least minimize the harm or just accelerate the excretion of alcohol? A compound called DHM, dihydromyricetin, will literally accelerate alcohol excretion, and it will help to metabolize acetaldehyde buildup. If you take that after drinking alcohol, do not take it before drinking alcohol. You come home, let's say you're going out, you go into the SB, you smash yourself. It's like 1 a.m., 2 a.m., and you're like, all right, what can I take that's going to help to metabolize and get this shit out of my body ASAP? It's a toxin. Like, alcohol is a toxin, right? DHM, dihydromyricetin, you can find it from like nootropicsdepot.com. They've got some good shit. That can accelerate the alcohol excretion. You mentioned glutathione. If you take glutathione as a spray, 100 micrograms or 200 micrograms at nighttime, that can also help with that. And then you could also do the following day to protect the liver. So let's say you've just done some alcohol damages the liver. You understand that. TUDCA, this a bile acid, TUDCA. I literally just did a YouTube video on it this morning. Can literally help to regenerate liver damage. So reverse liver damage.
What about a couple of other ones? So milk thistle.
Yep.
Any science or research behind that?
Yep. So milk thistle has some impressive research. It will upregulate the body's production of glutathione. The only reason I don't prescribe it to guys in particular is because it can possibly increase prolactin. And prolactin is not really the hormone that I want men to be increasing, because it can interfere with testosterone production and mood and stuff like that.
Man, I honestly, like, I wish you had a store that could be like, this is your bundle. Like, I want this store, right? I'm going to talk to you after the show. We're going to do a store together. But I know you've got courses, right? And I know that there are men that are listening, and women, I'm sure, as well, but there are men that are listening that go, look, especially the first couple of points around getting stronger, looking at your test, building your test, all this stuff is so important, right? Where can they go? Because I know this is your baby. Where can they go to find out more information before we go on to the rest of the podcast?
Yeah, so the most advanced resource and the most up to date and cutting edge like course that I've developed is trtfree.com. So my brother and I spent months and months developing this. That course basically distills everything a guy needs to know to max out his testosterone production naturally. So it's going to go through supplements, the dosages, how to use them. It's going to go through lifestyle, how you can change your environment, your lifestyle, exercise. It'll also go through nutrition as well. So exact meal plans and diet plans and how to eat to max out testosterone. That doesn't include eating. It does not include having soy milk for breakfast.
100%. I learned that. Yeah.
But yeah, this is probably the most precious resource, and that's like, they can check that out at trtfree.com. But then I've also got tons and tons of YouTube videos. So, Boost Your Biology is my YouTube channel, and I think I've hit over 600 videos. They're like at least 10 minutes long. Just cracked the 5 mil total views today, which I'm proud about. Thanks, man. Yeah, stoked about that.
Congrats.
But yeah, they're like and then I've also got the Limitless course. That's what we had. That's what I launched before this. That's thelimitlesscourse.com. So if guys are like, they want to get nitty gritty and like deep dive into this stuff, like that's where they can check out my content.
Yeah, 100%. I know for a fact that like I've been following your work for ages. Yeah. And like, I love it. And I love anything to do with health and fitness and biohacking. And, you listen to all these other big names talk about stuff, but I haven't met anyone or seen anyone online that produces content that is as specific as you. Yeah. Fucking specific. You look at the Andrew Hubermans, the Gary Breckers and all these type of people, and none of them have produced content that is as specific as you. So I would recommend people to go check out your YouTube. Check out trtfree.com to look at that. And obviously they can inquire with you. And I'll leave all the information in the show notes that people can go and check it out. To get to the stage where you are now, right? You obviously have had an upbringing and you've had a lot of things happen in that upbringing to get you to the stage where you are now. You're confident, you speak well, you're wildly intelligent, especially within your specific area. So what is it about your upbringing that provides context and understanding as to how you've become the person you've become today?
Yeah, I'd definitely say a lot of my discipline and sheer willpower and level of focus has definitely been derived from like playing soccer. So like trying to become a professional athlete. You can relate to this big time. You know what an athlete mindset is like, very like, it's discipline, it's like sacrifice, it's prioritizing it, not being able to socialize. Like there's a lot of things that went into that. I did have a pretty traumatic experience though when I was playing. When I was actually representing Melbourne in Budapest, Hungary. I can't remember what year it was, probably 2013 or something. I was a centre back, so I was playing in defence. It's like I was big and strong for my age. I'm not as big now, but I was back then. I was pretty jacked and all that. And it was 0-0, and it was like the 85th minute. And being a centre back, obviously you have to hold the whole back line together. You have to tell everyone where to stand and just direct, but be an authority and just a sheer brute basically. Anyway, we were playing against a team that beat Real Madrid. They're called Honved. They were like a Hungarian, insane. The European football standards are just next level, man. Like they just made me feel like I was so shit. Like I'll never forget the first match. I was like, I got back into the bus and I'm like, geez, I can tell these guys, forget about school. They just play for 6 hours a day, every day. But I was saying to myself, I'm like, fuck, if that's what it takes to get there, look, I truly deep down, I think I knew deep down that I had something else to offer the world. I felt like I had playing soccer. I felt was good, but I knew I had something more to offer the world. I knew I had something greater that I could contribute and bring to the table. And that's when I got back from Hungary, I decided to enroll in that naturopathy degree. I quit exercise science. I quit playing soccer, and I started this naturopathy degree, and I went all in. I just went all in every hour of every day, like just researching. I knew I wanted to become the authority. I'm like, I want to be the best naturopath I want to be the best naturopath in Australia. I want to be like the guy that's like well known. I've got everything. I've got the right upbringing. I've got mum and dad who are there to support me. My dad's a pharmacist, even though it's like contradicting, Western medicine versus natural health. Thankfully, I love my dad. He's been supportive and, very helpful. Mum and dad are just, yeah, they're incredible. They're incredible. Like they don't know what's coming. They won't be listening to this podcast, but next year I'm going to fly them over to Europe, hopefully business class next year. They don't even know that's coming, but that's one of my goals, to say thank you. Thank you for being incredible parents.
That's a mad goal. I respect that. I love that, man. I have a similar goal. I won't share it because this is you right now, and there's a bit that we were almost touching on it, but we didn't quite get there.
Yeah.
It was the 85th minute.
Yeah, sorry, I segued.
No, that's right. I just want to find out what happened.
Yeah. So 85th minute, their goalkeeper got the ball, and he kicked it. He kicked it so far, man. Like I was centre back, obviously. He kicked it so far, it bounced way over the halfway line, and somehow, I don't know what happened, but there was an initial period of like anytime there's hesitation, you're done. Like in sport, zero hesitation. You can't be hesitation is weakness. I hesitated for a second. I wasn't sure whether I should try and meet the ball to not let it bounce or let it bounce. I let it bounce. It bounced over my head. The striker was behind me. He was quick, man. He was quick. He headed it down, like he got the ball. I'm like, oh fuck, he's literally gonna score. I was chasing him behind his back, and he finished. It was like that. It was literally like the 86th minute when he scored that goal. And my coach, fuck man, he gave me a mouthful, and I can feel the feeling right now. Even just talking about it with you, I'm getting that like heart pain, physical, like heartbreak. It's heartbreak. It's the same as like breaking up in a relationship. It was torture, man. I let the whole team down. We literally went to Hungary to play in this competition. I'm representing Melbourne. I'm 16 years of age. You're also a little bit fragile at that age. Like you're not that robust. And I remember I broke down. I started crying on the soccer field. And everyone, all the boys were like just trying to like they were all so upset though, because they were like, fuck, we almost had this team at 0-0. It would have been great. We would have loved a 0-0. We had no shots on goal. We literally had no shots on goal the whole game. They were destroying us. They were just killing us. And then, so Alan Davidson, I'm mentioning that was my coach's name. Yeah. I don't care if he listens to this. He'll be like, yeah, like that's just how it is as a coach. He hammered me, man. Like, and he crushed my confidence. I just felt a level of like severe breakdown. I remember just getting on the bus, like, and just feeling like I'd let everyone down, and people were trying not to like say, oh, Lucas fucked up. He's the reason why we lost the game. So that was really tough for me, man. Like that really, it really broke me down, and I reckon I'm sure it had some effect on me. Like after that, I'm not exactly sure what it did, but it was pretty intense. It was just really heavy stuff.
And you stopped playing soccer after that?
Shortly after returning to Melbourne, basically what happened was I was losing the love for the game. Like I was losing it was ironic because it was just as soon as I started getting paid to play, because I was playing seniors at like 17. So it's ironic how that switch happened, where it's like, okay, now you're getting paid to play. And it's like we kept losing, and every time we lost, I would be like, it kept affecting my mental health throughout the week. I'd just be like lacking confidence. I'd be shit at my part-time job. I'd just be like not like, I just couldn't back myself, and I just didn't have that level of confidence. And I kept saying to mum and dad, I'm like, this is really affecting me. Like, it's really, I'm not seeing more positives than negatives. There are more negatives now. So I'm like, I think I've decided that I'm going to focus on something else now.
How much of that lesson do you take into now? Because like, there's a couple of trains of thought. You have the train of thought of, let's ride out the emotion. Let's ride out the discomfort that sits behind, not having the ambition to play. And especially now that money comes into it, it's amazing because it's like the love of the game almost gets partially substituted for financial reward. And that is its own topic. But there's part of it that says write it out, and there's part of it that says, nah, cut it. And like, if you listen to Gary Vee talk, he's like, iterate quickly, move quickly, right? Not saying that this is the same, but you've adopted in the context of your career, a very short period of time, you've decided to stop. Looking back on that, would you have changed anything? And how do you feel that decision's impacted you now with how you make decisions moving forward?
Looking back at that, I would say that decision was the best thing that I ever did, because it was coming from here. It wasn't even a higher level, like a logical processing. It was coming from like, I'm coming from here. Like, there's something telling me that this is not right for me anymore. And I think I always sort of said that I wasn't quitting. I was doing a transference. I was transferring my level of energy and passion and drive into something else. It wasn't like I was closing up shop and then I'm just going to give up on everything. It was literally like, all right, I'm devoting that much energy and effort into that area. Now let's just transfer it into something else that I can become. My goal was like, what can I select that I'm going to become the best at? What can I do that I want to become the best at? And I was like, first of all, I was like, far out. There's not many male naturopaths in Australia. Like, why is that? Okay. This naturopath title, like, what does it involve? I'm like, I'm already living that lifestyle. I'm already like all about nutrition, all about supplements, all about blood testing. I was already wrapped up in that whole world. So for me to transition over into that, I was like seamless. I was like, what do you mean? I'm studying this? Like, I'm living it. I'm living what I study. So for me, it was like, how is this even study? It didn't even feel like work. And when I went to university, I have this joke with one of my best mates, Stefan. We used to joke about things because I used to finish assignments so fast. Like, just, they would hand out.
I can believe that. Yeah.
They would hand out the assignment, and I was like, a week after they handed it out, I was like, pretty much already done. And everyone else, it's like not due till week 8, but I was finished after week 2. And we used to joke about, oh, Lucas has already marked his own assignments and stuff.
A+, baby. That's so interesting. And I can resonate. I've spoken about it on this podcast before, but I really struggled to retire from cricket. There's a lot of injury, but it was so hard because part of my ego was like, or sense of self had identified as a cricket player, right? And wanting to pursue and telling other people I want to pursue playing professional sport. And then to have a realization moment where you're like, playing 10 hours on a Saturday, training twice a week whilst trying to run a business, your energy is so dispersed and you're like, can I swallow that pill? And part of it is swallowing the pill. And as you said, and so articulately put, re-emphasize where you direct your energy. It is not that you're stopping or quitting. It is you're like, my energy and my drive and my purpose is no longer being utilized well because it's being spent
Mm.
on something where it could be spent on something else that could help grow me as a person. And you hear about athletes that identify as being athletes, but then when the athlete gets taken away from them, all of a sudden they're like, who the fuck am I?
Yeah.
You know, and they have that massive crisis point.
There's also another part upon that is I felt like playing soccer was all self-serving as well, whereas like what I do now is like I'm serving the world. So it's like there's a greater level of impact factor that I get from what I do. When I create content, I'm literally thinking about all the different people that are watching my content whilst I'm creating the content. I'm like, this is not for me. This is for other people to benefit. And I'm like, that feels so good because, the gift of giving feels 1,000 times better than receiving. The gift of giving is everything.
And I think that's why, when you talk about wanting to be able to fly your parents over, what a fucking great feeling for you to be able to have achieved that as a son.
Oh, yeah.
It'd be awesome. On your journey, we've spoken about a little bit of adversity. I know through speaking to you previously that you've also had other things that have happened and some that are almost as a juxtaposition to your current job, right?
Yeah.
So can you explain to the audience what the fuck anhedonia is?
Yeah.
If I pronounce that correctly.
Anhedonia.
Anhedonia. And what is it? And how you are going about it, because this is one of the most fascinating things that I've researched, and I have some really interesting topics and questions about it.
Right. So anhedonia is it's a term used to describe an inability to experience pleasure or a diminished pleasure response. And the reason why I know so much about it is because, unfortunately, how many years has it been now? 6 years ago, when I was working for a nootropic startup, I had access to, when you work for a company that literally builds supplements, you can get access to whatever you want in terms of ingredients and drugs and everything, basically whatever. Back then, I requested a sample of something called ASHWAGANDHA from a company that makes millions of dollars worth of ashwagandha every year. They were the biggest company in the US supplying ashwagandha. I'm like, you know what? Let's get my hands on this and play around with it. Just dose it up whenever I want, see what sort of effects I get. Like, let's see how I feel.
What's it meant to do?
Anti-stress.
Anti-stress.
Anti-stress and anti-anxiety.
Sure.
So
okay.
Ashwagandha is like a natural benzo.
Cool. Got it.
So when I first tried ashwagandha, the very first time I tried it, I literally remember feeling like this wave of just like relaxation and stress just melt away. Like no anxiety. I literally noticed my personality change after that very first dose. When I say my personality, basically I felt like I was more relaxed in conversation. I was less intense and I felt like I had just less irritable energy, which is just, I think a lot of people carry that, but they're not even aware of it. Anyway, so what happened was about like a week later, I was still using it. Like I was still supplementing with it here and there. So I was like getting a feel for it because that's what I like to do. I like to get a subjective feel for things that I talk about. Then I was like, this is pretty TMI, but sexually, I remember when I had sex, I had literally experienced no orgasm or no actual pleasure response following ejaculation. So biologically, ejaculation and orgasm, they're actually separate. So they're actually not, they're not part of...
Fuck, my mind's blown. Yeah, go on. This is interesting.
So there's such a thing. Men can have orgasms without ejaculating. There is such a thing.
Yes. No.
You've heard of that?
Yes.
It's like tantric practice.
Practice, yes.
Yeah, so that's why they're actually separate. That's a pleasure response. So the reflex is the ejaculation. The pleasure response is the euphoria. The feel good hormone. Basically, orgasm is a flooding of all the feel good hormones and feel good neurotransmitters in your brain. After ashwagandha, and this has happened not only to myself, but literally thousands and thousands and thousands of other men. They say that when they took ashwagandha, it blunted their ability to experience orgasm, pleasure, joy, and things that should be giving you that you know what a good feeling feels like.
Fuck yeah.
You know when you have a nice bite of chocolate or a beautiful dessert and it tastes amazing. That response was blunted, and that terminology that we said at the start, that is anhedonia. So what happened was I then created a blog article on my website, because I had my website at the time. I wrote a whole blog article talking about ashwagandha, anhedonia, and I literally contacted some of the smartest people in the, like I'm talking I'm not smart compared to these guys. These guys are like, they understand herbal medicine, they understand the brain, they understand all these pathways. And one guy showed me one study that was done in rats in 1970s. Ashwagandha desensitizes the serotonin 5th 1A receptor. And I was like, the hell does this even mean? Like, what is this? Turns out that effect that ashwagandha can have is the same effect that SSRIs can have on the brain. So this is why people that go on, I don't know if you know anyone that's been on SSRIs or if anyone's suffering from side effects.
That's for anyone listening, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor.
Yeah, so it's a class of antidepressants, and people complain of feeling numb, right? Feeling numb, which means that you don't feel sad, but you also don't feel happy. So you're literally stuck in this numb state. So that state, unfortunately, lingered, and I was shitting myself, man. I'm like, what's happening here? Like, why am I still experiencing this numbness? Like, I'm like, this is not, people say it's in your head, but it's like, it is in your head. Like it's a chemical thing, but man, it was, once I did the blog article and I started getting all these messages from guys saying, fuck man, I'm suffering from the same side effects. How did you reverse it? I contacted the company. They threatened to sue me because they didn't want me to talk about this side effect because they knew how much it would affect their sales and their brand and stuff. And to this day, unfortunately, I don't have a solution. I don't have a guaranteed thing that will, I've got things that can somewhat help. They're like what I call Band-Aids. It's not a true fix. Just like with your, the migraine stuff.
Headache stuff, yeah.
The headaches, yeah. So for me, it's been, let's just say this. I probably dedicate at least 2 hours a day thinking about it. Like,
wow.
I'm not even joking, man.
Can I ask you a question then?
Yeah.
So, okay. Part of my thing with my headaches is actually looking at what the psychedelics that I ended up taking had effect on my receptor sites. And you said 5-HT1B. And
1A,
I think
1A.
1A. Yeah. I think mine is 5-HT2A.
2A.
Right. Now, obviously that was affected heavily by you looking at things like mushrooms and you're looking at all the other drugs overseas. You can look at, I think it's like ayahuasca, 5-MeO-DMT, like all this type of shit. Have you gone down that rabbit hole?
I am very, 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 very close to exploring that. Yeah, the mushroom route.
Because it's been used. It's been used at the moment in psychiatric medicine, mushroom and MDMA, only for more post-traumatic stress disorder based clients. But it has been shown. I know in the college, the Migraine and Headache Association over in America, they do a lot of work with psilocybin and all the different research behind that and the other psychoactive drugs. So for yourself, I mean, doing 2 hours of research a day, I mean, how much research have you put into this element of medicine?
I've seen it pop up numerous times, and I'm very much aware of the the binding profiles and what they can offer. I'm becoming more and more and more and more open to it, and I think that in the next probably few months I will be trialing, starting with the mushrooms, because I'm aware of. I've seen some guys say that it's helped with that side effect. It is a very specific thing that I'm looking at, like addressing. But I do have belief that they can potentially unlock something that's like become the default, because I don't want, what I get annoyed by is the fact that why is this the new normal? Because I always reflect back on, fuck, I remember when before I even took ashwagandha, I was perfect, man. There was no, I never even had to think about whether or not I'd get this lack of this numbness or emotional blunting. And then you can also look at it and be like, has that helped you with your business? Like this emotional blunting? Has that been your secret weapon? And I haven't spoken about this on any other podcast, but I do think that that ability to not get too emotionally in train, like this, how, go to like New York and stuff, they say, cut your emotions out. Like you're in business now. This is business. I think it's had a positive effect on me in that regard.
And is that positive effect, you think, in relation to a lot of people have a fear when they're going into business around the perception of others, right? That seems to be the biggest limiting factor. Do you think that that's the main thing that's been, I guess, of assistance to you, or has it been the dialing of actual productivity?
Yeah. So I think, so for example, there have been times when I'm like, I know if somebody else was in my shoes right now, they'd be shitting themselves. Like they'd be scared or fearful. They'd be feeling the fear. But I think, I'm not going to say that I'm completely fearless, but I'd say like it would have helped to dampen the intensity, or like, yeah, the intensity of that anxiety. It's an interesting one.
Is pleasure the same as happiness?
I feel like pleasure is more of an acute short-term gratification, an immediate thing, whereas happiness is like your baseline level of like contentment with how things are, sort of thing.
Would it be fair to say that you aren't happy or you are happy?
I would say that I am happy, but I'm struggling with like a particular reward pathway.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome, because, and the reason why I asked you that question was because there are so many people, right, that go through things. So for instance, for me, right, I had a foot injury that really stopped me from fucking playing cricket for a year, right? And it racked my brain to work out the process of treating it, because one thing I tried not to do was treat myself when I got injured, because I would hyperanalyze, overanalyze, fucking you name it, anything and everything. And then it got to a stage where I was like, fuck, I can't fix this fucking thing. What is going on? And I treat people every single day and get them better from all the different problems. But this specific one, I just couldn't nail it. And but then if I were to ask myself the same question I asked you, is independent of that scenario, I was happy.
Yeah.
But there's still something inside of me that needs work that would be more fulfilling to my overall stance of happiness. And it's important, because how you reframe your positioning is how you move through life. And we're never going to have 100% of things always work our way. I'm going to talk about sex really quickly, because obviously that's something for a lot of men is one of the most taboo, like least talk about things, right? Is having good sex in the bedroom. And there's two issues with people that have sex. One, they finish quickly, all right? And they don't get to actually enjoy the pleasure response, because their orgasm, which is separate, happens too fucking quick, right? And it's so interesting.
Been there before.
Fucking me too, and that's fine, and I'm open to talking about it. But I've also had the exact opposite.
Delayed.
I couldn't orgasm.
Wow.
I couldn't. And I have a really good understanding and feeling as to why. But I mean, in your line of work, and you talk about testosterone being one of the male sex hormones, how much does that play a role in orgasm? And is there anything that men can look at or take or do to help them improve in the bedroom?
Yeah, so I've studied this also very extensively.
Great.
Yeah, I've studied because I know that it's a common issue, and it can affect a man's level of confidence in the bedroom. And this is if you're a guy wanting to, let's say you're a premature ejaculator, like it can be an issue when you're trying to like impress a girl, because it's like if you're going to finish quickly and you're not able to go again quickly, then it can be a bit of a letdown, no pun intended. So this premature ejaculation is actually, a lot of it's mediated by the brain. So the neurotransmitters that actually delay ejaculation, one of them is serotonin. So the higher a man's level of serotonin, generally speaking, the longer he can last. So serotonin has it delays ejaculation. You can see how this can be a problem though, because then if you've got too much serotonin, it blunts the pleasure response. So you can actually have a bit of that numbness that I was talking about. There is a herb that I have prescribed to men, and it will make them last longer. And it's not unsafe. Like, it's actually a great herb, phenomenal herb. It's called Shilajit. Shilajit is like what they say, the conqueror of mountains and destroyer of weakness. And Shilajit, gave some to my best mate. He's like, bro, this stuff's like, it's like made me last so long. He loves it, basically. If you look at like delayed ejaculation, that's sort of a different ball game. That's more related to like not enough histamine. So histamine is another neurotransmitter that can actually make a man ejaculate quickly. But we also need to remember that two parts of the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, you'd understand this, sympathetic and parasympathetic. If you are predominantly in that sympathetic state, you're more likely to ejaculate quicker. Whereas the guys that are calm, they're breathing well, their heart rate variability is very high, they got a low resting heart rate. These are the guys that have the insane endurance, and they're less likely to ejaculate too soon.
So you're saying if I take a Zyrtec and a fucking bit of Shilajit, I'm sweet?
Yeah.
That's mad. So let's deep dive into that a little bit more, because I've also done research into this as well, and it was quite interesting because I was given Shilajit more from like an optimizing health perspective, and they used that with Dead Sea Ormus. So they looked at the minerals from the lowest of the low and the highest of the highest altitudes.
That's awesome.
And then they created that, and I think the company was called Mana Vitality. And the girl I used to date, she actually got me onto it. She also got me onto semen retention. So she clearly was after.
She got you onto that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, she's really in tune with like men's hormones, women's hormones, like just an absolute wealth of knowledge. And so one of the things was around that was, you've got different elements to being able to control someone's ejaculation. You've got the psychological component of it. Some people are in their head. You've got the hormonal component of it. And you've got like the component of it, which is like the ability to actually do the action, right? And know what you're doing. If you know what you're doing, maybe you can help stimulate yourself. If you don't know what you're doing, maybe that's the case. One of the things around stimulation is porn. And we know that porn floods the brain with dopamine.
Terrible.
And we know that flooding the brain with dopamine regularly creates almost like, you talk about that blunting response, but your body needs to produce more dopamine in order to get the same feeling or effect. How does that affect your position in the bedroom? Because a lot of people use porn to reduce sensitivity so that they can last longer.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So they call it the preparatory wank, right? It's like, all right, I'm about to go to dinner. I'll do a preparatory wank in order to make sure that I'm good to get home later. Is there a solution like what you've just stated that you think would be better, or is that damaging in terms of yourself when it comes to hormonal perspective?
Yeah. So the that approach there, let's just say the younger generation, I'm worried about their perception of sex, because pornography is not healthy for the brain, particularly like extreme versions of it. Like it's not real, sets expectations. I think that what can happen is, if let's say 14, 15, 16-year-olds starting young, I would say this would have to be very common, right? Like 16-year-old guy, probably there's quite a lot of 16-year-old guys right now that are probably watching porn every single night. I don't think it's a good thing for the brain because what you said, desensitizing it, affecting dopamine. It probably, I've never tried that strategy to delay ejaculation. Like the way I look at it is if you're a guy, you have extremely high testosterone and you've got good sexual power, you should realistically be able to, like, even after finishing, you should be able to go again within 5 to 10 minutes or so of stimulation. That shows you have high testosterone and low prolactin. We said at the start before that about prolactin. Prolactin is what puts the handbrakes on an ability to go second round. So if you get a massive prolactin spike after finishing, forget about getting another erection. If you're a guy that has low prolactin, you can get hard again pretty quickly. Like it should take like maybe 10 minutes would be good for a guy in his 30s. Like that would be pretty awesome. But again, you can still enjoy, each other's company in the bedroom without. You can wait, go have a sweet or a chocolate bar. Go into the kitchen, make a meal, come back and go again.
Yeah. Put a little timer on in the corner. 10 minutes. It just starts timing down. You got fucking 10 minutes. Every girl listening to the video, like, all right, 10 minutes. He should be right. Slap it and wake it up. That's brilliant. So, okay. So let's talk about prolactin and let's talk about blood tests and let's talk about these type of things because in friendship groups, blokes tend to not necessarily talk about this. And this is why I love talking to you about this because we're both mates and also we can both be open and share some knowledge. So if you are a male and you go, right, well, I haven't got the friends to talk about this too, but I want to get some blood tests done or look at some ways in which I can measure prolactin, I can measure testosterone, I can measure all of the things that we've stated. What can they do? Because I mean, this is a massive market. Huge fucking market. And there are people that are going through Pilot and through all these other, all those things, right? And I actually don't know what they do well, they probably do nothing. Okay, well, there you go. For premature ejaculation. But like you said, you want to feel the pleasure without the orgasm until you feel it's right to orgasm. Yeah. Right? And that is unless you orgasm as a reflex or if you decide to hold in the orgasm and utilize the energy through the body. What can they do from a blood test perspective or what can they do to check out so that they can optimize themselves for this? Yeah.
So first of all, any guy listening to this, if they want to get things checked, they definitely can get this blood test marker called prolactin. It's a hormone that we produce. And the good news is you can lower it and you can lower it naturally pretty damn well. You don't have to take drugs to lower prolactin. If you want to achieve like gossip-worthy bedroom performance, then you can take a stack specifically. There's a range of different supplements and compounds, vitamin E, ginkgo biloba, mucuna pruriens. Like these are compounds, herbs that can actually, L-phenylalanine. These are supplements that can literally help to lower that prolactin score on a blood test. So for guys listening to this and he's like, oh man, I want to get a baseline checked. I've never had, let's say you're a guy listening to this and you're like, I've never had my hormones checked. Like, what do I need to do? All right. First of all, if you can, is most of your audience based in Australia? Sydney? Yes. Yeah. So what you can do is basically go to your local GP and just say, hey, I'm suffering from these symptoms, such as maybe like fatigue, low libido, all that sort of stuff. Go to the doctor, present that and say, I want to get, and literally say, I want to get these checked. Testosterone, prolactin, DHT, estrogen. These are pretty, and SHBG as well. And basically, if you present that to the doctor, should be pretty, if you got a nice doctor, like he or she might just be like, yep, no worries. Here you go. Write the slip. Go get your blood test done. Go back to your doctor. Get the results from the doctor. When the doctor reads it off the computer, do not take it as it's normal. Okay. We're not looking at normal here. If we're really talking about feeling at your absolute best, prolactin score should be less than 150. So it should be, the reference range goes up to 400, and it's from like 50 to 400. So you want to be on the lower end of that reference range. You don't want to be on the high end. If you're on the high end, forget about having gossip-worthy bedroom performance.
I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to get some blood tests done at the end of this month of no training, no nothing. And what I'll do, and I'll speak to you after the podcast, is I'll compare that to then post 8 weeks of training and gym and see what the difference is. Because there's a portion of blokes that will be sedentary, that maybe aren't going to the gym, that aren't optimizing their nutrition and their health. So if I go from baseline sedentary to, let's say, adding in the correct stacks and compare that, plus a little bit of subjective data, which we can go into at another point in time, then it'd be interesting to see what that looks like. So I'd be really interested, and I'll touch base with you after the show, because I think that will be something that, from like a case study perspective, would be really cool to see.
Yeah.
Because I'm tracking what's happening with my hair, and it'd be interesting to see tracking what's happening with the hormones, because as you've said, it's so powerful, and so many men don't talk about it, don't know about it, and women do, because guess what? They have their period at a young age, so they have to learn about the body and the vulnerability to talk about the body incredibly quickly. Us blokes don't tend to do that. Finally, to round up this podcast, you are Australia's leading biohacker. You're a success. You've built yourself up, right? And I love it because tall poppy syndrome doesn't seem to have affected you. Everyone's boosting you up that I know, right? And loves having you around. To be able to get your content that you've delivered online to pop the way it has, what do you think has been the biggest reason behind your success, besides the fact that what you're putting out there is great content and novice content?
Love this question. So I would say the biggest impact factor for my content to really pop and for it to have the weight and the level of just impact factor has been my strategy. So my strategy early on, Singy, has been, if I know these guys, Andrew Huberman, Ben Greenfield, Tim Ferriss, Dave Asprey, all these big guys who are basically at the top of their game in this space, if I know they are like the kings, so to speak,
Yeah.
how do I get their attention? How do I get their attention so that their audience sees my content? So that has been my main approach. The number one thing that I did early on, this was second year university. I'll always be grateful for this moment. I was tagging these profiles in my posts. Bear in mind, all of my posts on Instagram are all education. So it's purely education. I was tagging Ben Greenfield, Tim Ferriss, Dave Asprey, all these big names on my posts early on. Luckily, that strategy worked. Ben Greenfield saw my post that I did on lychee fruit, right? Out of all the things in the world, he saw my post on lychee fruit. He sent me a DM saying, "Love your profile you've got here. Here's my number. Let's connect, like on a call." And I was like, I'll never forget this because I was actually on a date when I received that message. Sorry, but I said I was not interested in the date. I literally left the restaurant. It was on Sydney Road. I left the restaurant, saw the message just to make sure it was legitimate, and I broke down. I started crying. I started crying because I'm like, I know this is my big break moment. This is the moment that I've been waiting for, because to get someone like his attention at a very young age, to be on his radar, for then to be invited onto his podcast to talk about like biohacking and nutrition and all that, I was like, man, I'm going to be exposed to 500,000 people on a 2-hour podcast. Like, this is going to be incredible. So I'd say the strategy early on was to like garner I know people love Ben Greenfield because he posts content that's somewhat similar to my content. So I'm like, if any of them see my content, they're going to love my content because I'm similar, but I'm not the same. Like we're definitely not this. I'm not saying that we're the same. I just know that his audience would have a similar interest. And it's true, because if you look at all the clients that I coach right now, when my brother gets on a sales call with them, like, hey, how did you hear about Lucas? Like, oh, I heard him on Ben Greenfield's podcast. 9 out of 10 guys.
Wow.
So that, plus also the sheer level of care, attention to detail, and effort that I put in those early posts. Man, I would stay back after university. After class finished, I would be the last one at university designing IG posts. And everyone would I was at the standing desks. The lecturers would walk past me. They're like, what are you working on, Lucas? And I'm like, oh, not much. I'm just doing some graphic design. I was developing the Instagram post from I was so determined, man. I just felt like I had so much to offer. I just felt like I would look at I would look at I'd look at these posts and I'd be like, I can do better. I can offer something unique. No one's talking about this research. Like, I've got a good eye for like highlighting research, bringing it here, and then releasing it and showing people and educating. I love that. And I think that's really helped me along the way.
That's amazing, man. And I think, it's a testament to where you've got now. And for people that are listening and that have taken so much from this experience, how do they become a client, if they can become a client or want to become a client? And what do they need to do to keep in touch with you? I know we spoke about it in the middle of the episode, but sometimes people tune out and tune in. So could you please reiterate that so that our audience can find you, and it will also be in the show notes?
Yeah, so I really appreciate that opportunity to share this. So boostyourbiology.com. They can check out my website. There's so many good, like, amazing resources there. Lots of free resources, downloadables, everything, you name it, we got it. And yeah, they can get in touch with me through there, or Instagram as well. They can search my name. If I'm not shadow banned, they can find me on Instagram as well.
That's amazing, bro. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, it was awesome. Thanks, Singy.
Cheers, bro.